When Jamaican police announced a murder investigation into the death of Bob Woolmer in 2007, few people were surprised. Woolmer was the coach of South Africa when Hansie Cronje was found fixing matches, and he was also the coach of Pakistan when they amazingly lost to Ireland in the Cricket World Cup 2007. I met Bob Woolmer twice, once as an autograph-hunting teenager at the Oval in 1977, and once later at Canterbury. I'm convinced that Woolmer was a man of integrity, a man who was appalled and disgusted that the reality that international cricketers in his charge were fixing matches for betting money. How convenient, then, that after help from detectives from other countries, Jamaican police announced that there was insufficient evidence for a murder charge. I'm surely not the only person who's profoundly suspicious of the closing of ranks. Woolmer and Cronje can say nothing now. This BBC investigation was broadcast in 2007 when people were still asking questions.
Murder, not natural causes. The vital clues at the hotel where Bob Woolmer was strangled.
Anybody who comes out of the lift will be seen by that camera.
The dramatic test results which suggest Woolmer's death had been pre-planned. And rumours of corruption. But was there another motive for his murder?
I mean, Bob had his reservations that, that the boys really ought to be focusing more on cricket.
He was strangled in his hotel room soon after his Pakistan team lost a World Cup match to Ireland. Now that is like Germany losing to Luxembourg in the football. There were suspicions that illegal gambling might have influenced the result even before Bob Woolmer's body was found in room 374. Now the detective leading the investigation has spoken exclusively to Panorama.
Likes driving the ball. That's the right length, and he's taken it.
It was the most embarrassing defeat in Pakistan's history.
Lofted on the out. We are in danger of an Irish explosion here.
Top-ranked stars from a cricket-mad nation beaten by the part-time players of Ireland on St Patrick's Day of all days.
I wonder what is going through the mind of Bob Woolmer right now.
And there he is. Trent Johnson has hit the winning run. A slow delivery.
It was about 5:30 on Saturday the 17th of March when Pakistan's cricketers finally succumbed to defeat against the Minnows of Ireland here at Sabina Park. The Irish were jubilant. Pakistan's players, fans and their coach were all devastated. Nobody had expected them to lose this game. They wandered off to the dressing room to console themselves. And the coach, well, he'd already been thinking of resigning his job.
I have to apologise for the performance today. The team obviously didn't want to lose today. They worked very hard in the field. The most important thing about this all is it's a test of character for all of us, and we'll have to go and lick our wounds and have a look at the future later.
18 hours after this, the last ever interview filmed with Bob Woolmer, his body was found sprawled across the bathroom floor of his hotel room. An initial post-mortem proved inconclusive, but then 4 days later came the news that threw the World Cup into chaos.
The matter of Mr. Woolmer's death is now being treated by the Jamaica police as a case of murder.
His murder, 5 days into the tournament, thrust Pakistan's team back into the media spotlight, not as shock losers, but as possible suspects. The world's media descended on Kingston, Jamaica, desperate for clues in the murder mystery.
What's the word on the coroner's inquest?
Indeed, for the first few days, the only thing that everyone agreed upon was that Bob Woolmer was dead. Panorama was there too. We've spoken to the detective heading the investigation into the case, the widow, the Pakistani team captain and its manager. And we've also obtained the last images of Mr. Woolmer alive, taken by the CCTV system in the Pegasus Hotel as he headed back to his bedroom at about 7:30. We know that after arriving back at the hotel after his team's shock defeat, the coach stayed talking quietly with his players and some fans in the lobby area from around 6:30 onwards.
Bob spoke to me, you know, we were, you know, very sad. So he said, okay, we will discuss, you know, things in the morning, let everything remain as it is. It's no point, you know, talking about the performance right now. One never realized that that was the last word spoken by Bob to me.
He then left the group and headed for the lift. This is the last picture of him.
Well, my room is on the 11th floor of the Pegasus, and that's a story below where Bob Woolmer was staying, but the layout is exactly the same. So let's imagine Mr. Woolmer coming back here in the aftermath of that embarrassing defeat to Ireland.
Once back in room 374, we know that he ordered room service. His lasagna was delivered at 8:30. At about 9 p.m, he sent an email to his wife Jill back home in South Africa.
He did mention that he was feeling very down and depressed at the time, but nothing other than that.
And sending that email is the last traceable thing we know Bob Woolmer did before he was killed.
But what happened next? Well, eyebrows weren't raised until he failed to turn up for breakfast. But then the chambermaid came to clean the room and discovered Mr. Woolmer slumped here in the bathroom, traces of blood, vomit and diarrhea spattered on the walls. At some point in the intervening hours, somebody or some people had come into his room and violently murdered Bob Woolmer.
As these photos of the crime scene show, there was no evidence of a struggle in the bedroom. The man charged with finding the killer was Mark Shields, formerly of Scotland Yard, now Jamaica's #1 murder detective. Hunting killers isn't a rarity for him, far from it. Jamaica is one of the murder capitals of the world. But since the murder at the World Cup, Mark Shields' day job has taken a back seat.
Bob was a large man, and therefore it would have taken some significant force in which to subdue him and cause strangulation.
Thanks. Right, thank you.
Mark Shields gave Panorama exclusive access to his investigation, and he talked us through what he found at the murder scene.
Mark, this is my room. I think it's the same dimensions as Bob Woolmer's room.
Yes, very much so, yeah.
So when you first came in, what did you see?
Well, it was a relatively standard hotel room. There was no huge disruption in the room. The laptop was here. When Bob Woolmer was found, the chambermaid alerted a nurse, a doctor. They arrived and they moved Bob from the bathroom area. And if I can just show you the bathroom. It's a relatively small bathroom in this hotel. You can imagine a man in here who has fallen behind this door with his head towards the toilet, which is at the rear end here. The sink is at this end. And so there was some difficulty in getting the door all the way back.
So when the chambermaid came in, this door was basically wedged?
It was wedged by his body, that's right. It was not a pleasant scene in any stretch, really, in that there was some vomit. It was clear that he'd been ill.
The idea of him grappling with one or two people in this little bathroom is a curious concept, isn't it?
It certainly is, and that's the problem with the whole case, that there are so many anomalies around it that are not straightforward. That's what makes it so unique and actually quite difficult to investigate. I go back to the fact that at least if it's somebody stabbed or shot, it's very straightforward. This is a far more complex case, but we can only go with what the experts tell us.
The pathologist's report states that Mr. Woolmer's death was due to asphyxia as a result of manual strangulation.
From the upper chest up to the head, there was a blue tinge to it, which would suggest asphyxiation. That was commented on by the doctors. And of course, I asked some very straightforward questions. Could this be self-inflicted? And I was informed, no, absolutely not.
So, suicide was ruled out very early on. Police were hunting at least one murderer.
How tough is it, in reality, to strangle to death another man?
It's difficult and it's rare. A lot of force would be needed to do that. Bob Woolmer was a large man, and that's why One could argue that either it's an extremely strong person or maybe more than one person, but equally the lack of external injury suggests that there might be some other factor, and that's what we're looking into at the moment.
One factor, one line of inquiry gathering momentum is whether or not Bob Woolmer was poisoned prior to his murder. A second and more detailed toxicology report isn't due back until next week. But we can reveal that those tests will show there was a drug in his system, something that would have incapacitated Mr. Woolmer. As he was being strangled, it's almost certain that he'd been rendered helpless, and so he was unable to fight back. Specific details of that poison are now very likely to offer a significant lead in finding his murderer. News of his death had shocked his players, but news that it was murder stunned them.
They were shattered, they were devastated. You know, it was one of the worst periods in our cricketing life. You know, you're out of the World Cup, and the next morning you come to know that your coach has suddenly died. You know, it was shocking, really shocking.
So how did the murderer get into Bob's room in the first place? And would they have been filmed on the way? Mark Shields took us to the 12th floor of the Pegasus.
We still have police officers on the floor because we still have a crime scene, so we're protecting it as best we can. And you'll see there are 3 lifts onto the 12th floor, and up here we have a CCTV camera which gives good coverage of this area, which means that anybody who comes out of the lift from this side will be seen by that camera, and if they go into that corridor we should have a record of it. There's another security camera here which gives very good coverage of the corridor. This is the emergency exit, the fire exit. So again, anybody using the staircase and avoiding the lifts would still have to come through here and along.
So it's... The hotel's CCTV tapes are currently being examined frame by frame at Scotland Yard in London. If they show that no one took the lift or the stairs to the 12th floor to kill Bob Woolmer that night, there is another possible solution. His killer was already staying on the same floor. Along with Woolmer, half of his squad and entourage were in rooms on the 12th floor, as were some other cricketing stars, like the West Indies skipper Brian Lara.
If somebody was in one of these rooms, left a room, they could go to Bob Woolmer's room, go back to their own room, and so that's something we're considering.
Yeah. And as you can see, there's the front desk.
As well as the dozens of CCTV cameras in and around the hotel, there's also a computer record of every time a keycard is used to enter a guest room, including Bob Woolmer's.
There's no key entry, but from the time he entered the room and the time the room attendant went and opened that door.
So it would have to have been Mr. Woolmer opening the door?
It would have to be him.
So did Bob Woolmer open the door to his own killer or killers that night?
It's likely that all he was wearing was a towel that I think human nature would dictate. If it was a stranger, it is unlikely that you would let somebody into your room.
If it had been somebody, one of the hotel staff, or somebody he thought maybe a member of hotel staff, like the cleaners or room service or whatever, then he may well have opened the door.
Some of the first people to be questioned were the Pakistan squad, including the manager Talat Ali. He says they were only ever questioned as witnesses, never as suspects.
The boys were asked, when did they last see Bob? Was there any stranger in the hotel at that time talking to Bob? What time was Bob at the dining area? Did you see any suspicious guy? These were just plain, ordinary questions. When the impression given was that we were suspects, it was nothing like that.
But Inzamam ul Haq, the former captain of the Pakistan team who spoke at Bob Woolmer's memorial service, has no doubt that he and his teammates are suspects.
I'm sure I'm definitely. And but I think it's a regular investigation, because I'm asking the policeman also why is questioning is everybody. He says is not Pakistan team, is also is a Ireland team as well and other team as well.
That was a super shot from Woolmer.
58-year-old Bob Woolmer made his name as a batsman for Kent in England, winning 19 test caps for his country. Outspoken, he was often at the centre of controversy. In the 1970s, he signed for media tycoon Kerry Packer's World Series, which changed the face of one-day cricket. And then, in 1981, he sacrificed his England career to join the paid Rebel Tour to South Africa in the days of apartheid. His modern-day coaching techniques were widely copied, and they made him one of the most influential men in the game.
He's a dedication man. He's a dedicated man to the cricket, and he's working hard.
He was really committed to help other people, and that was his focus. He became a very great educator, and that in a sense was why he was such a good coach.